Greed, the Golden Hand. Brought to you by Mr. Face. There was once a man that hoarded all of his wealth. One day, far into the past when he was poor, he was working in a mill when, from his coat pocket, a rare coin fell. In his fear-induced greed, he grabbed for the coin and lost his balance. Trying to right himself, he grabbed for the table. He missed. His right hand was sawn off. This made the man feel very handicapped and less than those around him. As a kid, he was beaten and had low self-esteem already. Never dealing with those traumas, as that was not a thing then, he let his low confidence grow into greed for wealth. Wealth in itself is not a problem, but when paired with fear of not being enough, it can corrupt those with demons. He became so deranged that he'd lost the most powerful thing a human can possess, compassion. He'd succeeded in his desire for wealth and power, but failed miserably in the quest of feeling enough or better. He'd become so wealthy that he had owned all of the mines, stores, and water rights within a 20-mile range, and people suffered miserably and harshly. Several times, people pleaded with him, but every time, you could only find him with a golden hand that was fitted to his right arm, waving it in a manner to dismiss those people and their problems. It got so bad that finally, a young girl of 12 died of dehydration. The man with the golden hand felt absolutely nothing for the family or the dead child. He reclused himself even more as more and more people started to riot. His bodyguards they had hired to protect his wealth and him left the gates open one night, as they turned a blind eye to the mob. The mob took the man and threw him into a large box that was in the ground. He looked at them and then pleaded that they did not steal his wealth. The townspeople looked at him with anger and pity, as they did not care about the wealth. They asked him if he felt sorry for anything that he had done, if he had even any remorse for the poor child that had died. He looked at them. His eyes were beady and shifting. Again, he asked them not to steal his wealth. They asked him to choose, though they had no desire for his wealth. You can donate all of your money and live, or be buried alive with your treasures. The man begged for his treasures, as if he didn't comprehend what was happening. They brought all of his wealth that they could find, and poured it in, again and again into his soon-to-be grave. He counted all of it, even told them where to find more. They did, and finally as they got the last amount, they started to grab the cover, and he yelled with grief in his voice. They thought maybe he had had a change of heart, but they were mistaken as he started to shout that he needed his golden hand. He couldn't find it. They looked and looked, but could not find his golden hand. He demanded that they find it before they buried him alive, but they searched high and low, and it was not found. They decided to be done with it. The man had no remorse or feelings of compassion, so they started to pull the cover over. Then the man spoke. His voice sounded scary, low, and demonic, but he clearly stated, "If you do not give me my golden hand, I will forever hunt these lands until I find my hand." His eyes were shimmering red as the mob hurried and nailed the coffin shut. You could hear him screaming for his golden hand and pounding on the wooden box that would become his soon-to-be grave. The townspeople did not know, but the golden hand had fallen into the dirt pile and brushed over with dirt while they hauled his treasures to his coffin. His golden hand was just below the top surface of soil, where they buried him alive. They said you could hear him scratching and pounding for months, far longer than it was possible for a person to live without food and water. Thereafter, on stormy nights, those that lived close to the area swore they could hear someone begging and screaming in the distance. As time passed, it became the town's folklore. Forgotten and uncared for, the town grew. More and more houses were developed, spreading further from the old town into the property that used to be the man's grounds. Looking down, you could see a family hauling stuff into their new home. This home was far from any other houses, newly built, and just the right distance that yells would go unheard from by neighbors, which was perfect for a family with 4 boys that loved to be rambunctious while at play. The family knows little about this small town that they've come to. Their parents had a company that required them to move quickly. Excited to start their new journey, they bought a house in a hurry and started moving. The parents were talking about how they had to go back for another load and what to do with the kids. The two middle children, Rick and Cliff, were playing with soccer ball in the backyard. Cliff, the older middle child, tripped and fell to the ground as the parents yelled for the older child, Oliver. The parents asked Oliver if he'd watch his brothers for the next day, as that's how long it was going to take the parents to get back with the next load. Oliver agreed with the guarantee that they told their youngest, Xander, they had to listen to Oliver. Xander was a stubborn child. The parents agreed and started talking about the rules with Oliver. Both Cliff and Rick were looking at what Cliff had tripped on. "It looks like gold," said Rick. "Shh, be quiet," Cliff said sharply with a grin on his face. "Listen, if this is gold, you and I might be able to buy our dirt bikes we've been wanting, but we have to keep it quiet so no one takes it." "What are you guys talking about?" Xander, the youngest, said, coming out of nowhere like from the shadows. "Xander, don't say a word to anyone. We'll cut you into the deal and get you that biology book that you've been wanting," said Rick with large eyes. Xander looked confused, as he didn't actually hear what they were talking about. But he knew a good deal when he heard one. He'd been wanting this biology book for a good time now. "Okay, I won't say a word," he said as he made a zip action over his lips, locked it, and threw the key away. Rick smiled and said, "That's right. Now, let's dig this out and put it in our room upstairs before they see it," pointing to Oliver and their parents. Spiriting the hand away to their room, they hid it under the bed. This was an action they would soon come to regret. Off into the distance, the clouds looked threatening, dark blue and covering the entire horizon with lightning streaking across the expanse. An ominous presence started to persist in the night. It was slowly taking its advance towards the house. Something beneath the ground shifted, turning over in its turmoil, its greed, and its desire for its hand growing. Cliff and Rick were looking at the dirt encrusted golden hand. They decided to clean it. After getting it to shine, they started to play with it, when Oliver burst into the room trying to catch his brothers breaking the rules. They tried to hide the hand, but were too slow. Spattering raindrops started to hit the window as Oliver said, "What is that you have, Cliff?" Accepting that he should just tell his brother the truth, he said, "It's a golden hand that me and Rick found. We're going to sell it and buy our dirt bikes." "And my biology book," Xander piped in, coming out of nowhere and picking the hand up off the ground. Cliff and Rick jumped, as they didn't know Xander was in the room. Rick exclaimed, "Xander, would you stop sneaking around like a creepy ninja?" "It's not my fault you guys are loud and I'm quiet," he said with an even look. Oliver looked confused. "So, you guys have a golden hand that you found and you're going to sell it. Where did you find this golden hand?" "In the backyard," Cliff said plainly. "And you didn't tell Mom or Dad?" Oliver said, exasperated. "No, it's ours," said Rick greedily. "And how would you guys sell it? Are you going to go to the bank and have them buy it in exchange for money? You don't even know how much it's worth," Oliver pointed out, annoyed. "I guess we didn't really think about that," Cliff said with a sad face. In the background, Xander was looking at the golden item. He tried to stick his hand into the golden hand. It fit, and then a loud boom emanated in the backyard as a bright light flashed into the windows, making them jump and blinding them. It started to rain and hail, like the storm had emotions of its own, and it was of anger. The wind picked up, blowing really hard against the house. With big eyes, Rick said, "I hope there isn't a tornado." A little shaky, Oliver said, "We should hear sirens if there is a touchdown." Xander was by the window, looking outside, when lightning lit up the night for a fraction of a second, and he thought he seen a figure standing out in the yard. Xander's eyes opened big, and his hair stood on end as he swore he heard a groaning, harsh voice say, "My golden hand." Xander dropped the golden hand with a jolt. Cliff and Rick looked at Xander with anger. "Why did you drop it? You could have dented it." I didn't mean to. I thought I heard something," Xander said, trying to play it off. Rick was looking the hand over when the light started to flicker. Then the power went out. Rick put the hand on the bed. "Don't worry, guys. We have a lamp in Dad's and Mom's room," Oliver said, starting to fumble his way through the dark, when Xander made a flick-flick noise and lit a lighter. "Xander, why do you have a lighter?" Oliver said, with shock apparent on his face. "You always have to be prepared for the darkness to consume," he pointed out around him. "Bro, you need some psychological help. By the way, we're telling Mom you have that before you decide you need to fight the darkness with some arson," Oliver said, lifting his eyebrow with a sigh and walking to his parents' room. As the boys turned the lamp on, they heard and felt crackling thunder as well as some loud thuds against the door downstairs. Going down to investigate, they heard 3 more thuds. Oliver was about to open the door when Xander said, "Don't open the door. I thought I seen someone outside earlier and they looked scary." Xander's eyes were dilated and wide. Oliver was surprised and taken aback, as Xander had never been the source to get scared like that. 2 more thuds hit the door. Oliver looked back and said, "Hello? Is anyone there?" Silence ensued. Oliver reached out to the door handle. He slowly twisted it and creeped the door open. The darkness of the night was so thick it felt as if you could cut into it with a knife. Oliver was looking through the cracked door when he thought he could hear strained, heavy breathing just beyond his vision. Then a loud burst of thunder made him and his brothers jump. Startled, Oliver shouted, "What in the glazed donuts?" He slammed the door shut and said, "Well, I don't think anyone is out there." Then 3 loud booms. The house shuddered with force of pounding on the front door. All 4 brothers looked to the door with wide eyes. A deep demonic voice groaned, "Where's my hand?" They ran upstairs, going into their parents' room and locking the door. They heard a loud crash downstairs as if the door had been exploded open. They heard footsteps that had to belong to a very heavy person enter the house. "Where's my hand?" The brothers had open mouths looking at each other. Oliver turned the lamp off and whispered, "Let's stay quiet." As the lamp went dark, the room instantly felt heavy with a presence that left you uneasy, like someone was standing just behind you at your back and out of sight. The footsteps started towards the stairs, and again you heard, "Where's my hand?" Rick started to cry softly. "Shh, we don't want it to find us," Oliver said gently. Each step the creature took up the stairs, the air got cooler, the presence got heavier, and it started to smell like ammonia. It got so strong, it felt as if your lungs couldn't take in any air, and it stung. It reached the top of the stairs. Xander's heart started to beat so rapidly, it felt like when a butterfly brushes up against you, fluttering. "Where's my hand?" The floor creaked, with rapid footsteps as if someone was moving with a speed that blurred. The door groaned while being slowly opened, just to a sliver's length when it stopped. Silence ensued for quite some time. Then Rick screamed as he was thrown across the room and slammed into the wall with a stopping force that dropped him to the ground unconscious. Oliver screamed next as he was hoisted into the air by a skeleton with the eyes the color of unfriendly gold. "Where's my hand?" I don't know," Oliver said with tears of fear. The creature dropped Oliver as if he didn't exist. Cliff was trying to see the best he could while hiding in the closet, when he heard a thump as if someone had been dropped to the floor. When eyes looked him directly in the face, he jumped as they blurred a second later. The door was thrown open and he was hoisted up by his collar. A mental blast hit Cliff as the possessed skeleton said, "Where's my golden hand?" Cliff didn't answer as he just cried, and then was thrown into the hanging clothes and moved no more. Xander had hid under the bed. He was keeping quiet as Oliver had said. He heard all of the commotion that had taken place and was doing his best, but against his will, he was quietly shaking and breathing heavily. Unable to govern his body, he heard something moving about the room. It was too heavy to be his brothers. He gasped as he couldn't seem to get enough oxygen in his lungs. The noise stopped. Then the bed creaked and groaned as a heavy weight was on it. Doubling down, he got control of his breathing and he became completely silent. Minutes passed and nothing made a noise or moved. He waited longer. All the while, his brain was going rampant in all the possibilities and unknowns that plagues a person's mind who is ignorant and in the dark. Xander scooched out slowly from under the bed until his shoulders were exposed. He froze as the bed moved a little. Then he heard raspy breathing. Xander slowly pulled his lighter from his pocket, and with 2 flick noises he lit it. He looked around with the limited light that emanated from his lighter. He couldn't see anything to his right, so he looked to his left. Then he felt the bed move again, and as he turned his head back forward, he seen something in his peripheral vision to his right. Snapping his head over, he looked a skull straight in the face. It was dripping green ooze from its teeth. Its eye sockets were dimly lit by a yellow, rich flame, and before he could even scream or move, he was lifted into the air as the skeleton stood. It looked him directly in the face, as it held him and said,
"You've possessed my hand. Where is my golden hand?"
"It's in the other room," Xander said, terrified. Taking jerky, hard steps, the creature walked with Xander in its hand as it went into the hall and into the room. It threw Xander across the room as it rushed to the hand and put it on. It turned to look at him on the floor and said,
"Greed is power, and I am whole to return."
The skeleton burst into dust with its most precious and beloved hand. This ordeal was over. Xander felt relieved and lightheaded, his vision slowly winking in and out of focus as he fell asleep from the fear-induced exhaustion, to never be plagued by the golden hand again. The end. A note from Mr. Face. Greed can possess humans to forget their morals and the need for them. To counter this, I believe it is important to know what and why you are driven to actions that you take in life. And always ask yourself, is this out of self-power or to gain supposed power? As always, thank you guys for listening to my stories. I hope it finds you in health.